Hi, welcome to the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast, where we get to the source of what makes people brilliant and explore how to eradicate the barriers that stop you from shining. By shining, I mean being at your absolute best in both work and life. You'll hear from business and thought leaders who bear all and share their insider secrets, along with my episodes focused on optimizing your performance, productivity, success, and well-being. My name is Estelle Reid, founder of Be, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author of Inner Brilliance, Out to Shine, 10 Antidotes to Imposter Syndrome, Workaholism and Stress. So, if you're ready to take your work life to the next level, let's begin. Hello there, welcome back. So if you've been listening along, you'll know that I am partway through reading from my best-selling book, Inner Brilliance, Out to Shine, 10 Antidotes to Imposter Syndrome, Workaholism and Stress. And I've been given permission to read excerpts from my book. So this is from my publisher. So what I'm doing is I'm reading everything except for the action steps. And the reason being, one, if you're listening to it, you probably are not going to have a pen and paper to hand. You're probably doing your washing or out jogging or whatever else, or laid on your back on your sunbed. But second of all, you can actually access the action points on my free workbook that accompanies this book. So if you're genuinely interested in doing the work, then that's where you can get it. And you can access that workbook, if you're watching this on YouTube, on the QR code that you can see next to me, or if you're listening to this, so if you go over to my website, which is estellereid.com, you'll be able to download the workbook there. So we're on with chapter 2. And this is antidote number 2, and the chapter's entitled Captain Your Own Ship. You must take personal responsibility. You cannot change the circumstances, the seasons, or the wind, but you can change yourself. That is something you are in charge of. Jim Rohn. We have a motorboat which is moored in the Lake District. We used to. We now live here. She is affectionately known as our caravan on water. My husband tends to be the captain, aka Evel Knievel. That'll be a reference if you grew up in the 70s. He likes speed. I'm the health and safety officer. When Evel Knievel gets carried away and breaks the 10 nautical miles an hour speed limit, I take the helm. In this chapter, we're going to look at how you too can take the wheel and be the captain of your own ship, so that you prevent it from sinking or crashing on the rocks. When it's the 3 of us on board, our boat is very stable and easy to drive. However, the health and safety officer inside me goes into overdrive when we have extra bodies on board. It can feel like it's going to keel over. There was an incident on a supposedly sedate tour of the lake. I turned around to find, God rest her soul, she's no longer with us, my 91-year-old Nana flailing about like a rag doll and at risk of bouncing off the back. I took the helm. The more people and baggage on board, the more unstable the boat becomes and the greater the drag. It is an inefficient way of us cruising. The boat has a weight limit in the instruction manual to prevent it from sinking. In this chapter, we're going to look at how best to operate your ship. Heading, your ship. We too are at risk of sinking if we're overloaded with work caused by limiting beliefs, behaviours and emotions. Let me introduce you to your ship, which contains many things. Heading, your autopilot. This is your unconscious mind. Everything that takes place here is automatic and without conscious awareness or thought. Heading: your captain. This is your conscious mind and is responsible for taking charge of your results, making decisions, steering your ship towards your desired outcome and away from workaholic habits. The captain takes positive action. Heading: your inner captain. This is the voice inside your head and includes the words you use and the tonality. Your inner captain will learn to squash imposter syndrome thoughts. Heading: your bridge. This is your command centre of your ship, which receives information from both internal bodily sensations, thoughts and feelings, and external sources, what you see, hear, smell, taste and touch. Being able to tune into this information when you need to enables the captain to make well-informed decisions. The bridge represents your self-awareness. Heading: the crow's nest. This symbolises your ability to become the objective observer, more mindful as opposed to getting lost or overwhelmed by an experience. This is important as you begin to make connections with memories and your present-day behaviour, beliefs and emotions. Heading: your treasure trove. This represents your gifts, talents, strengths and achievements. You're going to learn to accept and embrace these. Heading: your baggage. This includes the past experiences that are weighing you down, creating drag on your ship and still influencing you today. Relax and be easy. We all have baggage. The tools available to help you navigate through this book include the Inner Brilliance How to Shine Journal. This is used for writing down your observations, thoughts, feelings, learnings, memories and actions to resolve any issues identified. You can download this, as I say, on my website estellereid.com. Then there's the Inner Brilliance How to Shine workbook, and that's the workbook I was referring to earlier, and again, same website address. And this includes all the activities and questions from this book. I'm going to introduce you formally to all of the above metaphors throughout the book. Your ship is the vessel which carries you to your destination. Most human beings do this on autopilot, and if they're lucky, things work out for the best. For others, they can end up at what I refer to as destination grim. Or you can take charge of your desired outcomes in work life and consciously steer your ship towards destination joy. In Chapter 6, you will begin offloading any excess baggage, which is weighing you down and steering you in the wrong direction. Excess baggage creates drag on your ship, and for some makes them sink. This extra and outdated baggage, more about this in Chapter 3, makes the journey slower, less enjoyable, and takes more fuel and effort. Hence why, when this baggage is removed, success feels more effortless and natural. Heading: ownership of your treasure trove. When a ship is first registered, its country of origin is documented. Its nationality allows a ship to travel internationally as its proof of ownership. Our ship contains our treasure trove of gifts, talents and achievements. If we don't own our ship and all it has to offer, how do we know where we can travel to? I hear so many clients rejecting and minimising the talents, abilities, strengths, achievements and accomplishments. They undervalue themselves because of their imposter syndrome thoughts. They give off the wrong vibes. All that self-doubt causes doubt in others. It's the equivalent of walking through border force under the nothing to declare sign, looking guilty as hell because you're worried you might get found out or stopped, but actually you genuinely have nothing to declare. I hear my clients claiming responsibility and assigning blame to themselves for problems that aren't actually theirs. then some seem to sail through going under the radar without a second thought. When we don't declare ownership of our gifts, talents and achievements, and I don't mean in a foghorn way, to ourselves, it damages our self-esteem. When our self-esteem is damaged, we give off the wrong vibes. I say to my clients, it's the equivalent of holding a white surrender flag above our head which says, it's okay to take advantage of me. Because of our work hard ethic, we gain the reputation of being a good egg who will do anything for anyone, is reliable and always delivers on a promise. Our needs are forgotten because we're busy putting everyone else's needs first. In fact, we've spent so much time thinking about what everyone else wants, we don't know what our needs are. You're going to home in on your needs on chapter 4 and 5. For now, what gifts and talents and achievements do you need to take ownership of? At the end of each day, try writing down all the things you did well in your Inner Brilliance How to Shine journal. Capture your observations, thoughts, feelings, learnings and actions to resolve any issues identified. Coming off autopilot. To start to own and take charge of our ship, we need to come off autopilot, which is run by our unconscious mind. Bruce Lipton, PhD, former medical school professor, research scientist, and author of The Biology of Belief, proposes that we operate from our autopilot 95% of the time. However, this can be as much as 99% if a person has low self-awareness, which I'll come on to shortly. An enormous portion of cognitive activity is non-conscious, figuratively speaking. It could be 99%. We probably will never know precisely how much is outside awareness, says Dr. Emmanuel Donshin, Director of the Laboratory of Cognitive Psychophysiology at the University of Illinois. Our autopilot is the thing that enables us to communicate, make decisions, carry out tasks, act and emote without thinking. It received a good chunk of our behaviour, belief and emotion programming by the age of 7 through our experience and people around us. These programs enabled us to act without consciously thinking. For example, automatically agreeing to do anything that's asked of us with a smile on our face. Piling up our to-dos, extending productivity hours without a second thought about the personal consequences. So what if we miss that planned session at the gym, or catching up on our favourite TV programme, or having time to make a home-cooked meal, or putting the kids to bed, or being able to see a friend? Before long, the stuff we do to rest and recharge, to reinvigorate, to rejoice in this amazing thing we call life diminishes. We're on that constant loop of work and sleep. And that's if you're lucky enough to not be waking up in the middle of the night thinking about all the things you haven't done. When I run my stress management courses and I ask the audience, when was the last time you had fun? They tend to look at each other in confusion and say, fun is for children. They even get me to clarify what I mean. I'll say things like, the last thing you did that made you go, wee, in your head. Or even better, out aloud. Like, for example, flying down your first blue run or cantering on a horse. We sacrifice time for ourselves for time for work. Breaking this habit requires us to consciously raise awareness of any limiting beliefs, behaviours and feelings. This awareness helps us to take back the helm and to be in charge of the outcomes we're getting. Otherwise, we are ships without a captain, wondering how we ended up at destination grim. We can then change our automatic programs either through conscious repetition until we develop a new habit, which is then handed over to your autopilot, or we cheat change and we use havening. The neuroscience explaining the detailed functioning of the brain is extremely complex and beyond the scope of this book. Here I use a simplified model to explain the functions of the unconscious mind, which has connections with the work of John Grinder and Richard Bandler, the co-creators of NLP, NLP being neuro-linguistic programming, a communication and personal development model. Heading: the unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind can do amazing things outside your conscious awareness. Heading: simultaneous processing. According to Bruce Lipton, we are unconsciously processing 40 million bits of data per second. A piece of data could be your left big toe pressing against your footwear, which you may now become consciously aware of. All this information comes in through your senses, and these processes inform our intuition. For example, you may have interviewed someone and instinctively knew that the person wasn't right for the role or the organisation, but then struggled to immediately articulate your reason why. That is until the information bubbled up into your conscious mind, often when you least expect it, like for example in the shower. Heading: non-verbal communication. The unconscious mind conveys what you think through your body language, such as looking at your watch when you're wondering how long the meeting will go on for. It's so annoying that, isn't it? When someone does that in response when you're chatting away. Some people have had training to mask the body language to cover up what they're really thinking and feeling. However, this is when we can start to look incongruent with the message we're trying to communicate, and it's also why politicians come across as being insincere or unbelievable. I'll be talking about when it's beneficial to change your body language in Chapter 7. Heading: store our memories and past experience, which can inform or damage our future. So again, we're talking about the functions of the unconscious mind. For example, those childhood events which created our values and beliefs. We'll take a deeper dive into these in Chapter 4. Our brain has an amazing ability to make connections with similar experiences so that we have a neural network of events which relate to the same belief. For example, I'm not good enough. We'll begin to trim any unhelpful neural pathways in Chapter 6. Our unconscious mind can also produce automatic emotions, actions, skills, behaviours and habits. Anything we become competent at and can do without thinking. If you've been driving for a while, I bet you drive to work unconsciously. Did you say to yourself, mirror signal manoeuvre, or did you arrive at your destination without thinking? That's your autopilot. Once we become unconsciously competent at a task or activity, behaviour or way of responding emotionally to a situation, our unconscious mind takes care of it for us. This is where we can get into bad habits because our unconscious will take the path of least resistance, i.e., where there is a well-established way of being, an entrenched set of neural pathways. It's easier for the unconscious mind to take that route. This is why behaviour change takes repetition or using something like havening to cheat, so that you can diminish the unhelpful neural pathway, enabling new ones to flourish. Think of it, for example, as it's the equivalent of when you're out walking. So here in Kendal, we go up Kendal Fell most mornings, and there are various routes, and there are some off-track routes as well. And I noticed that, so I'm recording this during the summer, that all the grass has grown up and it's quite tricky to get onto the golf course at the minute. But actually you can see that people are still using a bit of a path through the long grass, and That's the same in your brain. So when you are unconsciously competent at something, that automatic neural pathway will fire, and our brain will take the path of least resistance, so that entrenched path in your brain, just like the path that's been trodden down through the long grass. So the other thing that your unconscious mind can do is it can run our autonomic system, which is responsible for the control of our bodily functions, not consciously directed, such as breathing, pumping our heart, and digestive processes. It's the system that allows our fight or flight system to slam on our brakes when a pheasant decides it will be a good time to cross the road. Imagine how exhausting it would be if we had to control all of these things consciously. So, next heading, your captain is calling. For the purposes of this book, your conscious mind is represented by your captain. The role of your captain is to navigate more intentionally away from destination grim and towards destination joy. You'll define what this is for you in chapter 5. Your captain's also responsible for taking charge and making your desired change happen. Don't be passive in this process. You have to take action. To begin with, that means completing the activities in this book or the workbook. And there's another reminder here to download the workbook. Some scientists believe that we are between 1 and 5% consciously in charge of our actions. And 5% is for the more self-aware of us. Most of us operate at 1% consciousness. No wonder we end up marooned at destination grim. We don't do it on purpose. It's simply a lack of either not knowing we can take charge or play victim or persecutor. More later about these patterns which keep us stuck and unable to lead the work life we desire. If we're only 1% consciously in charge of our actions, imagine what we would be like if we increase this to 5%. That's great news. It allows you to be something different, to get better results, to change your workaholic habits, to reduce your stress, to diminish your imposter syndrome thoughts, to get comfortable in your own skin, to enjoy work and life more. Let's get to know your captain so that you know what it's capable of. Heading, conscious mind. So your conscious mind is logical and uses common sense, linear and thinks in straight lines, able to process around 40 bits of information per second, rational, analytical and questioning, deliberate, decides and directs, able to organise and give direction to the unconscious mind. So in other words, give direction to that autopilot. Here lies another opportunity. We need to ensure that your captain programs your autopilot effectively. This is why in chapter 5 you'll identify destination joy through a series of goals and a vision. It is also why you'll get to grips with your inner captain in chapter 8 to ensure the words you use in your head give the right direction to your autopilot. If your programming is naff, your output is at risk of being naff too. Additionally, in chapter 6, you'll be able to suppress the neural pathways connected to limiting beliefs, behaviours or emotions using Havening. This will change your unconscious programming and support you to develop new habits and behaviours. To give positive direction to your captain and stretch your conscious control to 5%, you're going to need great self-awareness. I'll refer to your awareness as the bridge, and it will work in conjunction with your captain. So moving on to your bridge. The captain can often be found on the bridge when difficult manoeuvres are required. The bridge is the command centre of your ship and represents your self-awareness. Your bridge receives information from many sources, both internally, so your bodily sensations, thoughts and feelings, and externally, what you see, hear, smell, taste and feel. Being aware of this information enables the captain to make well-informed decisions. For example, when you have something difficult to say, this will become important when you get to chapter 7. The best communicators are those with high emotional intelligence and are positioned on their bridge. They are tuned in to how the message is being heard by observing the other person's body language, voice tone and words. This is the external information received by the bridge. This information prompts the inner captain to reflect and consider, is this conversation going well or not? What should I do next to get this conversation back on track? Internal information received by the bridge. The captain then makes a decision based on the information received from the bridge and takes action. For example, smiles and says, hey, I've miscommunicated what I wanted to say. Let me put this another way. From the bridge, you'll be able to detect when you're mindlessly going through an experience, for example, being on a beautiful walk but not noticing the beauty because you're busy thinking about something that happened at work. You can use your bridge to tap into how your body's feeling and performing as opposed to ignoring that ache in your shoulder. This is communication from your ship. It's telling you to stop doing something. Your bridge can be used to tap into beliefs, behaviours and emotions at play when you've been triggered or something isn't working for you. For example, if you believe you're boring, which results in you not speaking up in a meeting, this is the behaviour. In other words, you not speaking up in the meeting and then feeling frustrated afterwards. You would use your bridge to raise awareness of this. Your captain would then have some decisions to make. Do you ignore the 7 iceberg warnings like the captain of the Titanic and carry on sailing regardless, or do you divert and do something different? Sometimes we become blind to what's really going on for us. We suppress and delete the truth. I'm suggesting that where work and life could be better, you could look at things with a fresh pair of eyes. The idea of your bridge is that having received the information, your captain can, first of all, assess whether something is working or not, and then take corrective action where necessary. Program your autopilot so that you end up at destination joy as opposed to destination grim. And again, I'll be explaining how we do this in later chapters. One of the decisions your captain may make based on information from your bridge is when to use your crow's nest so that you lessen the impact of an emotional experience. Heading Crow's Nest. In Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence, he talks about the importance of self-observation. At a minimum, it manifests itself simply as a slight stepping back from experience, a parallel stream of consciousness that is meta, hovering above or beside the main flow, aware of what's happening rather than being immersed and lost in it, says Daniel. I love Daniel's description. This is the type of observation I'd like you to use as you begin to raise your awareness of limiting beliefs, behaviours and feelings and where they come from. This is so that you lessen the impact of old feelings until you're ready to deal with them in chapter 6. For example, sometimes clients can have an abreaction when they think deeply about something from their past, resulting in them getting upset. To reassure you, crying is perfectly fine in my coaching practice, especially when someone has been repressing and hanging on to old stuff for a long time. Sometimes acknowledging and releasing the emotion in a safe place is all a person needs to move on. However, if you allow yourself to become fully absorbed into the negative memories associated with the limiting belief, behaviour or emotion, and don't deal with it there and then, it could make you feel bad. Only allow yourself to become immersed if you're using a technique to clear the memory and the triggers, such as havening or EFT, which we'll come on to in later chapters. For traumatic memories, I'd always recommend seeking out a qualified havening practitioner or EFT practitioner. I'm both, by the way. To adopt the crow's nest position, simply imagine you're floating above an experience or memory, or to the side if you're afraid of heights. Objectively observe what's going on for you or the other person over there, seeing yourself playing out in the scene as opposed to being in it. The distance will reduce the intensity of feelings. For example, years ago I opened my Filofax to find a big hairy spider. My immediate reaction was to chuck the Filofax across the room. That distance decreased my yuck feelings. That distance and being able to tune into the facts of the matter will help you reduce any feelings. I find the crow's nest position helps me to deal with situations where I need to be able to be more objective and set my feelings to one side. That is, if they're preventing me from achieving an objective. At this stage, avoid taking any deep dive into your baggage, which incidentally, as I've said before, we all have, which will become apparent later on, because I'm going to be sharing lots of stories. Because if you allow yourself to access your past and begin over-analysing, you'll begin to re-experience old feelings as the connected neurons where the memories are encoded begin to fire. If you do this, you run the risk of making yourself miserable. You'll be able to offload any unwanted baggage in Chapter 6. Alternatively, if you do find yourself getting drawn into thinking about upsetting memories, do what parents do to distract a toddler who are stuck in a state. Distract yourself, move your body, change the environment, focus on something different. And if all else fails, tell the thought to stop and skip forward a chapter and learn how to use havening now. One of the best things about qualifying as a coach was that the realisation that work life didn't have to be a certain way. I could chart my own course, I could be the captain. But as we all know, sailing to new, undiscovered territories requires bravery. Next heading, victim, persecutor or brave captain. Another thinking trap we can fall into is getting stuck in victim mode. Victims wait to be rescued and are persecuted by their problems, things which they believe they have no control over. It's like the sheep near where we live. They learn to stay stuck in the field as a result of getting an electric shock from the fence. As lambs, the electric shock teaches them to stay trapped in the field as adults, even when the fence isn't switched on or is broken. They give up trying to make a bid for freedom because they hold the same beliefs. We too can be like sheep, believing that we're stuck with our lot in work life, incapable of change. However, science tells us that we can rewire our brain, which is continually responding to our environment, physiology, emotions, and lifestyle. This theory is referred to as neuroplasticity. Add to the fact that we can even alter how our genes are expressed by changing our thoughts, feelings and beliefs and our environment. So in other words, it's not a given that we will get cancer, it's whether this gene is switched on by our actions. This is according to the science of epigenetics. I'm not editing that out. Based on research conducted by Bruce Lipton. Another way we get stuck is by turning into a persecutor, blaming everyone and everyone else for our misery. However, both victim and persecutor positions can be comforting, can't they? We don't have to take responsibility for what's going on around us or the results we're getting. We don't have to take constructive, corrective action. We're either too busy feeling helpless and paralysed or defending and fighting our corner. I once worked with a lady called Kirsty who was clinically depressed. In fact, in my first meeting with her, she told me that if things didn't improve in her work life, she intended to take a hot bath with some razor blades. She spoke non-stop for an hour and a half. Her story was well-versed and familiar to her. I'd been warned when I was trained as a coach that clients can sometimes get stuck in their story. She admitted that counsellors had previously terminated their arrangements with her. I was quick to clarify that I wasn't a counsellor, that I was a coach and that coaching required action and choosing to do something different. Several meetings in with my client Kirsty, I realised I was stuck in the Cartman drama triangle. There are 3 positions: victim, persecutor and rescuer. My client was the victim and I was the rescuer. When she arrived for a session, I adopted a less sympathetic approach and became more businesslike. I went straight into reviewing her actions so that I could establish what she was doing for herself to change the results she was getting in work life. I was also assessing whether coaching continued to be appropriate or if she needed to be seen by someone else. She picked up on my state change and immediately threw her head in her hands, grabbed a tissue and declared that she had not had a moment to herself. She said, "As you can probably see, I'm feeling very upset right now." I described the Cartman drama triangle theory and where I thought she was stuck in victim. I tried to explain that if I continued to rescue her, I was helping to enable her victim-like behaviours and that I wanted her coaching sessions to be different and not like her counselling. Her body shifted again. She gripped the arms of the chair, leant forward and said in a snarling tone, "You are not helping me. Coaching isn't working. I'm going to seriously consider whether I come back." This time I felt unnerved. She'd become the persecutor. She didn't want to take alternative action and was blaming me for the lack of results she was getting. Doing something different requires bravery and for us to become the brave captain of our ship. I'd always wanted to run my own business whilst I was training to be a coach. All my contemporaries on the course were busy setting up the companies. I was waiting for that confident moment. 2 years passed. Granted, I was building up coaching experience while I worked in HR, but I didn't have the guts to take the plunge. And I had all sorts of limiting beliefs as to why I couldn't run a business. I was a complete misery at home. My husband would dread asking me how my day had gone. I would launch into everything that was wrong about work. I too would switch between victim and persecutor. Can I just say, it's so funny reading this because I just don't recognise some of the stories. It's really weird. And that's a good thing because life has worked on, and why the hell did I write the book in the first place if it wasn't to help others move on as well? But yeah, no, I just had another full circle moment thinking, blimey, this was such a long time ago. Bravery takes risk and uncomfortable feelings. Kirsty wrote to me after a coaching session ended. She said that the uncomfortable conversation we had at the start of our relationship was the conversation that turned her work life around. As Susan Jeffers said in the title of her book, "You must feel the fear and do it anyway." Next heading, but I was a victim. I hear you. I've heard some terrible stories from adults about the childhood. I had some tough things to deal with myself personally, but I got over them and now I lead my best possible life, both from a work and a personal perspective. I'm so grateful I've made it my mission to help others to do the same. And I'd love to help you too. I've listened to stories which have secretly made me feel so upset and cross on my client's behalf. To think of the suffering they went through, these stories have ranged from a parent who beat his child up for not winning a street fight. He was 6 years old. The fear this experience instilled in the little human being followed him into adulthood. He was afraid of any male authority figures and would shake and sweat profusely when triggered. It held him back. That was until he let go of this through havening and adopted the thinking strategies that follow in Chapter 8. He was dedicated to his Project Me time. Now his career is skyrocketing and he's been promoted twice. I feel so proud on his behalf. I've worked with adults that felt ashamed and to blame for sexual abuse they experienced as a child and were so scared that they were unable to tell anyone about it. As adults, they used the only strategy they knew would help keep them safe: control. But it became exhausting for them, having to be in charge of everything and keep themselves busy so that their minds didn't wander off to those painful memories. Of course they missed the joy of work life. There was no headspace for it. Then there are those at the other end of the trauma spectrum who simply felt mistreated as children. They were shamed, bullied, and made to feel like a fool by teachers, friends, siblings, parents, or family members. These experiences leave a lasting imprint and can create drag on our ship because they weigh us down, particularly when we're re-triggered in adulthood. My clients are often completely unaware of the childhood experience which created the limiting belief, behaviour, or emotion until I repeat the specific words they've used. Hence the need for the Inner Brilliance Outer Shine journal to capture your thoughts and language. Havening will help deal with these experiences and lighten your load in Chapter 6. So in essence, the idea behind the complimentary journal that sits alongside this book, which you can access at estellereid.com, is that through that creative writing and also unconscious writing, and it's important that you actually write, not type. When we type, it accesses a different part of the brain. That writing will help you access what you really think at a deeper level. And the coaching process that's contained within that journal will help you to start accessing those limiting beliefs, that language. And then as you get on to dealing with that stuff, what I encourage you to do in subsequent chapters is start to highlight that language so you can access those limiting beliefs. And then what I do later on in the book is I'll show you how to clear that stuff up by accessing the childhood events that created the limiting belief. It's fairly complex, I'm going to be straight with you, but if you're pretty self-aware and you dedicate yourself to some journaling, you can do what I did. Failing that, for those of you that think, I can't be bothered, I just cannot be bothered with faffing around and all of that, and you want me to do the heavy lifting, I have my Shine one-to-one coaching program, which is available at the same website address, and I will do all the havening and all the belief identifying and all of that stuff, and I'll clear it up for you because I appreciate not everybody wants to do the work themselves. So I'll carry on with the book. We can continue to blame our parents or anyone else that was involved in those negative experiences, but all we're doing is hurting ourselves. Each time we think about those memories or find evidence which proves we aren't enough, because that's what most limiting beliefs boil down to, it's the equivalent of going to the gym and lifting weights to build a muscle. But we're building the wrong muscle, aren't we? The limiting belief muscle. The neural pathway of competence, we can become very competent at not believing in ourselves, by the way, gets stronger and stronger, not to mention all the negative chemicals we create by having those thoughts, which then rush around our body and make us feel bad. You know, folks, that's how we end up depressed. reflecting on negative crap from our past. And as we think about those negative things and we go over and over those past events, it really depresses our state of mind and makes us feel negative. So there are real good reasons for making ourselves focus on positive stuff. And I'm not talking about being Pollyanna-ish and, let's just pretend everything's okay. Again, what I would recommend is, so as thoughts, feelings arise, so using your bridge to receive all of that information, use your journal to process through those thoughts or feelings. So rather than suppressing, because do you know what? When we suppress stuff, we end up going pop. Or our body will start to give us pain or illness as a way of trying to communicate with us. So instead of doing, as I say, all of that suppressing, process those thoughts and feelings through that journal. Right, next heading, Project Me Time. Sadly, nobody can make this change happen except for you. I often say to my clients, if I could wave a magic wand and fix this for you, I would. And I can through the Shine coaching program, in all fairness. It's time to dedicate yourself. I refer to this as Project Me Time. If you find yourself objecting to this, either because it feels selfish or you can't spare the time, why are you even reading this book? This is me with my bad cop hat on. Are you hoping that the change will happen through osmosis? If I sleep next to this book, the change will leap off the pages and permeate my being. I find it so frustrating when people continue to complain about the work lives and yet put zero effort into changing it. When we've got a problem, we can, so here are some options. Number 1, put up and shut up. Don't be fooled, this requires effort. It means accepting our situation along with all our accompanying feelings and choosing not to do anything about it. We also have to stop torturing other people's ears with our broken record and recognise when we're stuck in Groundhog Day. So this is the equivalent of suppressing, in all honesty. The other option is we can move away from a problem by changing our circumstances. For example, getting a new job, changing your partner, moving to a different house. The third option is we can consciously change our behaviour. For example, stop saying yes when we really mean no to prevent the work from piling up. And then the fourth option is we can get rid of our inner triggers using Havening or EFT so that our outer response changes. All of the above options require action on your part. You need to choose what you're going to do differently because eventually those around you begin to get empathy fatigue. Oprah Winfrey once said that people can be divided into 2 categories. They're either a drain or a radiator. Drains are people that make you feel negative and drained of energy, having spent time with them. Come on, we all have friends or family members that we can relate to that fit into this category. And I'm sure we've all fit into that category ourselves at some point. Then there are the radiators, on the other hand, who make us feel fabulous because they radiate positivity and joy. And equally, we all have friends like that, don't we? I've got a couple of radiator friends that I'm guaranteed a giggle with if I spend time with. When I qualified as a coach, I was encouraged to limit the time I spent with drains and expand the time I spent with radiators. And as Zig Ziglar said, the problem with pity parties is very few people come, and those that do don't bring presents. Right, back to being good cop. I will be your cheerleader, your confidant, although through the Inner Brilliance How to Shine journal. I want you to succeed, I really do, to do well, to experience the joy of work life. It is your time to put your own buoyancy aid on, not everyone else's. You'll be no good to anyone if you don't take care of yourself. At the peak of my ME symptoms, I can remember watching my husband and our daughter. He had her on his shoulders, dancing around the living room to the favourite song. I hadn't had enough energy that day to get dressed, let alone dance. I knew at that point that I had to make changes to my work life, if anything, for them. This helped me to reframe my project me time. So in other words, do it for your family, do it for your friends, if it is really starting to feel selfish. So I'm going to bring this chapter to a close. If you don't reserve a point during the day to do this, so in other words, the activities from this book, your time will get swallowed up by other activities, especially if you're a workaholic. Also, studies show that when you're looking to introduce a new habit, it can be useful to attach it to an existing one. For example, when I began reading books, I attached it to my first coffee of the morning routine. Here's a summary of key points. Standing on your bridge of awareness of what's happening now and coming off autopilot is the first step towards being the captain of your ship. Flick that switch. Rather than using your autopilot 99% of the time, become more consciously aware of the unconscious programs that are operating. What limiting beliefs and behaviours are driving you? Be the captain. Take charge of that 5% of conscious thought. Begin steering your ship. Start tuning into the internal and external information received by your bridge. This will inform your captain and prevent you from crashing on the rocks by taking alternative action. Use the crow's nest position if you catch yourself getting absorbed into negative experiences in your past. Make a note of any memories in the Inner Brilliance How to Shine journal and then move on. Don't analyse. You can deal with these experiences in subsequent chapters. Recognise when you're being persecutor or victim of your problems. Save yourself and be the brave captain of your own journey. Finally, when specifically during the day are you going to focus on Project Me time? So in other words, do the activities from this book. So that brings me to the end of chapter 2. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've been inspired to take action, remember you can download the free workbook that accompanies this book along with the journal, and you can also find out about my Shine one-to-one coaching program, which is based on this book, over at estellereed.com. Thanks for listening, and get ready to tune in to the next chapter, which is called Understand What Causes You to Sink. See you later. If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereed.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reed, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.